Welcome everyone. In this lab exercise, we are going to look at EFS. Now, EFS is the short form for Elastic File System, and it is a network file system, also shortened as an NFS volume. What we mean by a network file system is that this volume or this storage type is mounted on the network, so it is available for resources to, other resources to share. So it is something that it can share, or it's a volume that multiple EC2 instances or multiple resources that needs a shared volume to actually use it, since it is on the network. And it's also a fully managed storage service by AWS. That is, you don't have to worry about anything that has to do with the underlying instance or the underlying infrastructure that powers it. Talk of scalability and then all those security issues, right? So without wasting much time, we'll go into the hands-on on EFS file system. But before then, we will have to create security groups, right? We will have to, in as much as it's on the network, we need to also control what comes in and then what goes out. So we'll have to create security groups for our EFS file system. During the process of creating the EFS file system, you will need to specify a security group, right? So let's get into it. So I will just navigate to EC2. You can also find security groups from VPCs, right? But I prefer taking it from EC2. So I'll go to EC2 and then scroll down to security groups. Now we already have a security group here, right? We might want to also go into it and then look at the configurations in it, the inbound, talk of the inbound rules and then the outbound rules to appreciate what it is. So there is an SSH, right? A rule, an inbound rule of type SSH, and then it uses the TCP protocol, and it's also from anywhere, so it accepts inbound traffic or inbound SSH, sorry, from anywhere or any resource. And the outbound rule is also to allow all traffic outside. So this is the security group that we have. Now we'll create another security group that will also accept traffic or accept connections from this security group. So we'll copy this security group ID right to our clipboard. So let me just paste it here. This is a command that we'll use later, so I'll paste this one also here. This is a security group ID. Great. Now I'll create a security group from here, and I'll just name it EFS mount target, right? That is my security group, and then the description is to just allow inbound traffic, right? Let me say inbound NFS access from the security group that we copied the security ID, that is the EFS client, right? So the purpose of this security group is to just allow network file sharing access, right, or network file system access from other EFS clients, right? So we'll add an inbound rule, right? And the inbound rule is of type NFS. Okay, the port is a port 2049, and the source will be the security group ID, right? The security group that we copied its ID. We can decide not to paste. We can just scroll down. If we can identify our security group, right? You can just scroll down and then select it. But to prevent any mistake, you can just right, and then that is selected. So we have our rule created, and we'll have to also associate it with a VPC. So here I'll change the VPC. There is a VPC that has been created for us already. That is a lab VPC. So I'll select this lab VPC, and we are good to go. Right, so I'll just create the security group. Now the next thing is to now create our EFS file system, right? So there is a service called EFS. I'll search for EFS, and this is EFS. So I'll select EFS, and now from EFS I will create a file system, right? Because we would want to explore other options, we will not use this wizard. We'll just do customize, and then we'll be presented with a full window to create our EFS. Okay, so I will first leave the name here And what I will do is, yes, my storage is standard, but I wouldn't want backups for now, right? So I will leave the backup. For lifecycle management, we don't want any lifecycle management, so I will leave that to also none, right? For performance settings, we'll leave it at enhanced, and then we'll leave it as elastic. For tags, I will tag it, and then I will use tag name, and the value should be my first EFS file system. Right, you can choose any name that you want, but I will just use my first EFS, or normally EFS in itself is what, a file system, but then it sounds better this way, so we just leave it this way, and we'll go to next. So here we are going to do the network settings. So first we'll select lab VPC for our VPC, okay, and I will remove, I don't want the default, so I'll remove the default. So our VPC has 2 subnets in 2 availability zones, right? And for security groups, you remember I removed the default ones, right? So for security group, I'll select the EFS mount target. So this is the security group that I would want to give or attach to my EFS, right? That will allow NFS access, right? So this one too for the same thing, and we are done here. So I'll just go to next. Now for file system policy, we'll leave whatever it is. It's optional, right? But I mean, if you want to do it, that is like preventing root access by default, enforcing read only, preventing anonymous access, enforce in transit. You can also decide to just select, and then the statement will be written for you, or you can decide to write the JSON code here, but we will not do that for now. So we'll just go to next, and then I'll just review my settings, and I'll leave it. Now I would want us to appreciate this, that these are mount targets, right? So mount target has been created in each of the subnets for us, right? So when we did the network settings and then we selected the lab VPC, mount target were also created for each subnet. Great. And then these are the security groups this is the security group that we attach to each mount target, right? So we can now create our file system. Awesome. So our EFS file system is now created. We might want to refresh to see it's available now, right? If I should click on it, we'll be able to appreciate it more. So this is a general information about it, and this is the total size that has been used. You might also want to note that EFS is paid, so you are paid for the storage that you use, but this is a default storage or a default volume that has been used, so you are not paying for this one, but any extra volume that you use, you are going to pay for it. Great. So now we would want to attach it to our EC2 instance. So what I will do is that I will open my EC2. Now once I have my EC2 instance open, I will just select, right? What we are doing is we want to SSH into the EC2 instance. So you can use other utilities. You can use PowerShell or command line if you are using Windows 10 and above. You can also use PuTTY if you are using Windows 8 and below. You can still use PuTTY for the Windows 10 and above versions, right? If you are using a Mac OS or a Linux, you can just use your terminal for that. But there is a web version that AWS also gives to us, or offers us, or gives us the ability to SSH into our instance. That is the instance connect. So I'll just click connect here, and from this I make sure I choose instance connect, and then I'll just choose connect. Now what I would also want to do is to create a mount directory that I will mount my EFS file system to. Okay, so first I will create a new file system, a directory. So I will just do sudo and then make directory and EFS. Let me just put it in small letters, right? So this is a Linux command that creates a new directory at our current working directory. Alright, so sudo make directory and then EFS. Great. So now we would want to attach the EFS volume, right? Or we want to mount the EFS volume to this volume. So I will now go back to the EFS, and then I will click on attach. Right now there is a command that I can use. So if we are using an EFS mount helper, we'll copy this command. If we are using an NFS client, right, we'll use this. So we'll use the command under the NFS client, right? So I'll just copy this, and you can see the command says what? Mount type what? NFS for. So it's using the NFS for of type, and then option. The option is the version 4.1, right? The read size is the read size, this is the write size, and it should be a hard mount. It should use a timeout of 600 seconds, and then a retransmit time of 2 minutes, right? And other things that you have to note. And it is also mounting to the mount point or the directory EFS. So that is the reason why we created the directory EFS. So once I paste the command here, I'll just press enter, and awesome, my EFS file system or my EFS has been mounted. So I can do a sudo and then do df -ht, and I'll be able to see my volume that has. So even if you don't see anything or you can't recognize it, you can just look at your mount directory here and you can see this EFS. So this is the volume that has been mounted on our mounts directory, right? This is the volume that we have. Great. Now we would want to examine the performance behavior of our new EFS file system. So there is a utility that you can use to actually examine the performance of your EFS file system, and it's called a flexible IO, right? So it's more or less like a benchmark. The flexible IO is a benchmark utility for Linux. So you are able to use to test your Linux input and output subsystems, right? And this utility is automatically installed right on the EC2 instance during the boot. So I'll just use the command, right? It has a lot of commands. The commands are plenty, so I have it already here. So what I will do is I'll just copy this command, right? And then I'll copy it and come to my instance connect environment and then paste it. Okay, so just to explain few things of this command, and then we'll just go and I'll just press enter for it to run. Is the one, this is the utility name, right? And then the file name is FIOEFS, and it should write a size of what? 10 gigabyte, right? So, and then the file name, so this is the file name or the file path, right? So it will put the file in the EFS, and then the file name will be FIOEFS test.img. Okay, and other things that you need to note. So if you want the meaning, you can use other utilities for you to, especially AI, to explain the command for you. Alright, so I'll just press enter and the utility will start running. Now once this is running, right, we will be able to, it takes about 5 to 10 minutes to complete, right? And we'll have a full output. So let's wait for some time. I'll pause the video here and then wait for it to finish, and then we'll continue. Yeah, so it is not completed, but I would want you to also appreciate what is happening. So you can see it has one job, and you can see what is happening, right? So the percentage and then the volume that it has written, or the size that it has written so far. Right, so I'll pause the video again and then I'll wait for it to finish before we continue. Great, so flexible IO is done writing the file, and you can see the total size of megabytes that it wrote, and it is equivalent to what? 10 gigabyte, right? And you can see the writes, the kilobytes per second that you used, right? The IOPS and other details that you can also appreciate. So I might also want to add that the creating and then mounting of our EFS was done at this step when we did the make directory, and then we copied the mount command and then pasted it, and it was mounted. The flexible IO utility is just a complementary utility that we run to test the the performance of our EFS or our file system. Okay, So that was just it. So it's just a utility tool. So these are all complementary. So if you want, you might want to continue watching this video, or you can just end here. But I strongly recommend that you continue watching. So now we are going to monitor the performance, right, of the EFS file system, right, using a utility or another resource offered by AWS called Amazon CloudWatch. So come back to our console, and then now we'll search for CloudWatch. So this is CloudWatch. We'll click on CloudWatch. So CloudWatch is a utility for monitoring your AWS resources. So it's used to monitor performances, the performance of your AWS resource. Okay, and it's a metric based resource. So under metrics, we'll go to all metrics, and we'll look at EFS file system. Right, so currently we have about 33 metrics to actually monitor. Right, so under EFS file system, I will choose file system metrics, because these are the metrics that I would want to monitor. Great. So I will look at permitted throughput. Right, just this one. I'll just look at permitted throughput. There are other metrics that you can also look at. So you can see different volumes, right, different file systems and their metrics. So we have another metric here. So for us to appreciate, I think we have to go back and then look at our file systems ID. Right, this is our file system ID. So this is my file system, this one. Right, let me compare. So yes, this is a I think no, that's not the same. Great. So this is our file system, right? 86FC. Yes, this is it. Great. So I'll select this, right? Permitted throughput. Right. So once this is selected, you can see my graph has populated. There's a line graph here, so I can zoom in and then appreciate what was happening. So I can also do we have 3 hours. I can also do just 1 hour to see as to what was going on, right? So this is bytes per second. So you can see at this point it was writing almost a billion, right? A billion of bytes per second, and I think that was the peak. Okay, so it started from somewhere and then went up. So this is something that you can also use to monitor the performance of your file system, right? So these are the metrics that the permitted throughput that you can see. So it's actually scale, like, so for throughput scales based on the workload. So as your workload is increasing, the throughput also scales up, right? Because it started from, it will definitely, as we were writing, it started from some lower workload or lower volume till it was increasing, right? So that is also about the throughput of your EFS file system. So I can uncheck the throughput, and then I will look at data writes IO bytes, right? This is total. I want data writes, right? So but this is a different volume, so I will look for, okay, so I think this is it. Great. And from here I can also check for graph metrics, right? And I'll choose some. Let me change the period to 1 minute. Great. And you can see there is a line here, right? There is another line graph here, and if I should point to the peak, you can see the bytes that it was writing, right? About 7 billion bytes on the pop-up that you can see here. So if we should divide, so here the period is 1 minute, right? So if we should divide this number, that's a 7 billion plus, right? Let me open my calculator so that we'll do a quick calculation here. So if I should open my calculator, and I'll use the peak, right? So we have 76157988080, right? So this is there, and then we'll divide it by 60 seconds. That is the period that we selected, right? We have about 126 million, right? That's 126 million bytes per second, right? For my, so this is the throughput, the total throughput of 126 plus. So let's say 127 million plus. So with this, we can say we have about 100 plus, right? 100 megabytes plus of throughput, or we just say 126 plus million bytes of throughput for this file system. So that is basically about our EFS file system. This is using CloudWatch was for us to appreciate the throughput or the performance of our file system. So I hope you enjoyed this session. I'll see you in another video.